Someone messaged, they were like, can we have a virtual meeting? And I was like, no. No, we can't. I can't really speak.
Today?
So, yeah, like maybe we can wait till a bit later in the week to do that.
Just make sure they don't listen to this because this is basically a virtual meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the virtual meeting you didn't have with them. You're having with us.
I have to save it to do it now.
That's a good reason. What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not.
It sounds so stupid hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time. Celine and Jesse meet on a train in Europe. Jesse, a secret romantic, is on his way to Vienna to catch a flight back to America. Celine, a self-proclaimed romantic but fierce feminist, is returning home to Paris after visiting her grandmother. On a whim, Jesse asks Celine to get off the train with him in Vienna to keep him company until his morning flight. Surprisingly, Celine says yes, and the two spend the evening wandering and rambling, dancing, drinking, and making love. In the morning, the two panic at the idea of never seeing each other again, and without exchanging any contact information, plan to meet again in 6 months. That is Before Sunrise.
Before Sunset is the second film in the Before trilogy, starring Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and directed by Richard Linklater. Jesse and Celine run into each other almost a decade after their first date, having failed to return to each other after that night like they promised. Jesse is now a published author who has just released his first book to huge success. The book just so happens to be about his night with Celine in 1994, and this captures her attention when the book tour comes to Paris, where she lives. After stopping by the book signing, she and Jesse see each other for the first time in over 9 years, and they catch up over a stroll around the city before sunset, which is when Jesse has to leave for his flight out of Paris.
Before Midnight is the final film in the Before trilogy, directed by Richard Linklater and once again starring Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke. The film picks up around a decade after the events of Before Sunset and pays off the consequences of the idyllic romantic love affair of our two protagonists. While still keeping a similar overall style and tone, the film ramps up the drama and shows us how even that the truest of true loves still take place in the real world and have real-world consequences. That's life, baby.
And with that, welcome to the feature-length podcast, a podcast hosted by me, Carolina, as well as Dan.
Hello.
And Marco, who is a little sick today, so you may hear some coughs that I might be too lazy to edit out. Don't blame him for anything dumb he says.
Yeah, I am not in a great state of mind or physical health right now, but what a better perspective to talk about a Richard Linklater movie than like with real life happening in front of me and with me right now to be able to talk about these movies. No point hiding it. You know what I mean? This isn't fantasy world. This is life.
Oh my god.
This is real life.
This is real life.
Quick question. That's life, baby. Is that like an actual Richard Linklater
No,
quote? That's
just how I described his movie-making style in our chat.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
That actually came from somewhere.
Yeah.
No,
just
yeah.
me, the mind of me.
Yeah. I think it was after I joked about the fact that, once again, this is a movie of his that the structure of which has to do with real-life time jumps.
Yeah.
And your response, Carol, was, yeah, that's his style because that's life, baby. And I was like, okay,
got
well.
it.
And
That's
am I
fair.
wrong?
I mean, you're not.
No, you're not wrong.
Isn't that what all movies want to do? Capture reality, but in a more romantic light?
Okay. Who's gonna start?
I think Carol should start.
Yeah.
Okay. So my experience with these films is that I watched them at some point in high school, I believe, because my mom is also a rom-com stan, and so she always was like, this is a classic. You should definitely watch it. And I was like, okay, I will. And so I guess I probably watched it around the time that the third one came out, if it was 2013. That's probably what prompted her to be like, oh, it's coming out, watch them all. So I did. Not in theaters or anything, obviously. I didn't even see the last one in theaters. I just, watched them all illegally. Haha. And yeah, I remember really liking them because I kind of like anything that's vaguely romantic. Although I will not lie, I remember the first one really, really well. The second one, I just remembered the basic plot of, but kind of nothing else. And after watching it again, I kind of understand why, because it's just so short and so abruptly, but we'll get there. And then the last one, I remembered absolutely nothing about. And so watching it again for this episode felt like the first time. Yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like them all a little less watching them before this recording, but once again, we'll get into it as we go further into the episode. I think these movies would be enjoyed by maybe like hopeless romantics or people like in a new relationship or like really young people, especially the first film. I find if you're like in your late teens, early 20s, and like you are as dumb as they are, I think you'd really love it. But I think as soon as you pass over that hump, or maybe just because of the nature of the world today, I feel like myself and everyone I know is just a pure cynic and hates everything. So it's kind of hard to see these two dumb kids be like, haha, romance, love, feminism, politics, let's meet up in 6 months, cute. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing. I'm interested to see if you guys kind of felt the same. But yeah, so I think you need to be like a pretty optimistic, romantic person to enjoy these films. Although the last one definitely is more based in realism because it takes place so much later and they like have complicated lives and families at this point to tie in and a lot of history together. So I will say it is kind of nice that it does span that time to give that perspective, but it still just, I don't know, it still doesn't hit as hard as it did before I became the cynic that I now am. So yeah, just you gotta be a happy person, I think. Or just like, honestly, Julie Delpy, if you just want to look at her performance, I would also recommend it for that.
Okay. I'll go next. So I watched these for the first time for this, and I'd heard before now that they were like a very acclaimed, like, perfect trilogy. So I was excited, and I was kind of let down. And before I go any further, I know, like, I'm wrong. Like, these are all 3 of these movies are very acclaimed, and I'm sure there's a reason why. I just really didn't fuck with them too much. Like, they just really didn't do anything for me. Again, like, I'm in the wrong. I'm in the minority here, but I don't know. I just felt like the first 2 didn't really have too much. It didn't have too many stakes, so I wasn't too invested. I think the last one...
Damn, that's life, baby!
Even life has stakes, though. The last one, though, like, when they start in, like, the last half of the last movie, when that whole big fight starts, like, that was the most exciting part of the whole trilogy for me. What I do like about all of these movies, despite not really vibing with them too much, is I like how you can almost think of them as each movie is one act of a very long movie. Mm-hmm. And I prefer to look at them that way, rather than just because each one on its own feels sort of incomplete. Like, it doesn't feel like a satisfying story on its own, but I feel like putting them all together makes it more of a satisfying, fully told story. One more thing I want to point out right away is when the second one started and Ethan Hawke started talking about like how he wrote the book on the events of the first movie, I thought it was going to be a really cool meta thing where it retconned that the first movie was just a retelling of someone reading the book, and like maybe that's not actually how the night went, but it's just more of an idealistic version of how he thought the night went, because they start talking about how they're remembering the night differently, and like 10 years later, who knows what happened. But it didn't really turn into that. That was just sort of a minor, or not even like that just didn't happen. That wasn't what happened at all. So that was a little bit disappointing, because that would have elevated it like very much so for me. The second one did just kind of turn into a shorter version of the first movie, but with the characters being a little bit more mature. And I'll agree with what you said, Carolina, about especially in the first movie, like the two characters are very almost annoyingly naive. And
hey, we've all been there.
I know, we've all been there. Again, I'm wrong. Like, this is not... I respect that I'm... Like, these movies are very appreciated, so I don't want to piss anyone off. And I didn't hate these movies. Like, I didn't even really... I can't even say I disliked them. I guess they just weren't for me. And I'll go into my recommendation now, bridging off that. If you're someone who likes, like, romance movies in their purest, most potent form...
Yeah, like, not even a rom-com. This is just a rom, period. Don't expect to laugh.
The romance is the A-plot. Like, that is the plot, the only plot of these movies. So if you like that, I mean, yeah, you'll probably like these movies. Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy are good. They're both good actors. They're good in these. You can feel that, like, regardless, you can feel the chemistry between them for sure. In fact, the movies hinge off that, basically, so that better work, and it does work. So they have that going for it. And yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, you should check these out. If not, you probably won't get too much out of them, but they are Richard Linklater, so you might still want to give them a shot. I'm glad I watched them because of just what I've heard of them in like cinema history. It's a legendary auteur trilogy, so I had to check it out at some point. So yeah.
Nice. I had a very interesting watch of this trilogy. This was also my first time watching it. Because the first one I had watched the day before I came down with COVID symptoms. And then I had to watch the second two on the day I had full-blown COVID. And let me tell you, when I woke up that morning and realized I had COVID and also had to watch the two sequels, I was like, just take me now. Listen, to your point, Dan, the best way I could say was, like, I think Richard Linklater and just this style of indie movie are just a blind spot for me. Like, everyone else sees something that I don't, and I'm get that I'm wrong, and it's just a style thing, but also, like, I don't care. Like, I don't. But, okay, here's what I'll say, though, to be positive. I think, you said you didn't hate any of these movies. I think I kind of hated the first one.
Really?
Yes, just because of, like...
That's also the one I like the least.
Okay, and I have a theory on this. I think it's because of the fact that, A, they're the youngest, so they're the most naive, and B, it's the one where there's the least amount of structure other than just the conceit of, like, two people that are just chatting after a train ride or whatever, and they just kind of randomly talk about things. And I know that was big at the time. Like, Richard Linklater in the 90s kind of, like, made his whole career based on this idea of just, like, capturing real life, and it's because of him that this whole style of indie movie even exists. Like, him and Kevin Smith at the time, Kevin Smith making Clerks, like, are pretty much credited with being the two people that, like, revolutionized this type of indie movie of just, like, it's like real life. It's just people talking and hanging out and stuff, which is its own sort of sub-genre that I just have never gotten into personally. And I think a big part of that for me is a lot of those movies to me just feel like the characters are stand-in for the writer saying things that come to their mind, but, like, not developing those ideas. And that's the biggest problem I had with the first one, is it was just this very naive, I have an opinion, okay, now I have an opinion, okay, cool, let's move on to another topic. And, like, to me, it's like, that's great that you said some ideas that you had, and they're interesting ideas, but, like, I kind of need you to build on that and, like, have those ideas be tested in some way. And I think that's why these movies, each one got, like, exponentially better for me, because the second one, I was kind of shocked by how much I kind of was like, okay, I had a decent time with it. Part of that is probably because it's the shortest, which I think suits this style of movie better.
Definitely.
But also, I think there was like an inherent built-in structure that the first one didn't have, because like inherently it's like, so it has been 10 years and we are acknowledging that there's this weird fictional structure around it now, as opposed to just being in like its life, whatever. So I think that little bit of a structure of he did write the book and they are reconnecting, whatever, really helped me. And then I think the third one, I would straight up would say I liked the third one. Like, I, no qualifications or whatever, was like, oh, I just enjoyed the third movie as a movie. And to your point, Dan, I almost feel like I wish like I wish someone could like re-edit these movies into just like 1 2.5 hour long movie that's primarily the third movie, but then maybe we flash back to scenes from the first two, because I think the third one in a lot of ways really reminded me of Marriage Story, which is another movie that I really loved, but I just prefer that. And to your point, Carol, maybe it is just us being in our mid-20s and kind of getting through that young hurdle and being a bit more cynical, but like there was dramatic stakes from the beginning of that movie. By the way, like the movie starts and it's like a shot of Ethan Hawke walking with his kid and like just their feet, and the shot like pans up, and I was like, oh my god, they moved the camera, like they did like a choreographed shot, like this is a real movie now. But
that wasn't life, baby.
It wasn't
you don't
life.
See life like that.
Nobody sees life like that. Yeah. But yeah,
life moves the camera for you.
But and I guess like
that's how it goes.
That one, even though it stayed pretty true to the same conceit of just like these people talking, had the most, I think, visual flair, and I think it was the most structured like a movie, and it had the most built-in drama because of the fact that intrinsically it's a sequel of 20 years worth of these characters existing, and so like you can't not have dramatic structure, which is what I was lacking. And so I think it's why as these movies go on, I enjoy them more and more. And then also, to my other point about this whole type of genre, like when you get to that third movie, you kind of have no choice but to start answering questions and like rectifying topics that came up originally, because of the fact that it's a sequel, which again, going to my original complaint, like you actually have to like test things out. You actually have to like put characters in situations where their beliefs are tested. You're not just being like, here's an idea I had, okay, like we really build on it. Yeah, and you know, I will say across the board with all of them, like the performances are all, they're great. Ethan, the two leads are both great in all the movies, and the settings are really beautiful in all the movies. Even though I think the third one had my favorite cinematography overall, I think the first two were still well put together and well shot. Like, all joking aside, it's just very simple, but it's supposed to be simple. I get that. Yeah, but I do think that like it was like an exponential growth with each movie for me. And when I got to that third one, I was like, I could see myself rewatching the third one. Like, if someone was like, hey, what's this movie about? Like, I could potentially rewatch that one. I could probably even rewatch the second one because it was short, but I don't think I would ever like watch the first one again. I had a really difficult time getting through that first one. It's just not my style whatsoever. And then recommendation wise, you know, I mean, to piggyback off what you guys have said, like if you like Richard Linklater, if you like that early 90s conversational indie drama, with very, very low, borderline non-existing stakes, and it's more just about trying to capture real life instead of dramatize it, I mean, these movies are for you. Like, the first movie is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, like...
I know. Isn't that insane? I was reading that for the research, and I was like, okay, I used to fuck with these movies, but first of all, how?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
Well, remember, Rotten Tomatoes is just 100% of people said it was a good movie. It doesn't mean that it's
true.
Like,
but even still, that seems
like
that seems kind of shocking.
Yeah.
But anyway...
Well, I mean, also, didn't... Like, Boyhood also has 100%, which is another Richard Linklater...
Okay.
Real life.
That's one thing I want to say.
I've never seen that movie.
So, the time jumps in this, I was worried when I found out that there was, like, time jumps, like, real-life time jumps. I was like, for fuck's sakes, Richard. Like, but it really, I think, serves the movies and makes it better to have those, like, time jumps. I think it's genuinely useful in this, whereas I feel like in Boyhood, it was more of a, like, a trope. Not, a trope isn't a... It was a gimmick. That's the right word. It was more of a gimmick in Boyhood, whereas in this, I feel like it was natural to the storytelling.
Well, in this, it also feels like it's just like 10 years later he decided he wanted to make a sequel rather than basing your story off of the fact that you're going to film for 12 years and that's the only...
And that is
that's
true.
the only personality the movie has.
Every time a sequel was brought up to be made, it was literally just because Richard Linklater and Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke were just like, hey, it's been a while. Wouldn't it be interesting to revisit these characters? It was never planned. It was just kind of them reaching out to each other and seeing if they were interested. Common theme between all of them is that they all seem to be written within the span of like a week or 2 or 3, just the 3 of them sitting together and talking and sharing experiences and passing ideas back and forth, whether that be in person or via fax or via telephone or whatever. Like doing the research, it was all like, yeah, we were just like, oh, it's been 9 years, and then, oh, it's been another 9 years. Let's do it. Why not? And even Ethan Hawke is like, no one was asking us to make sequels. We just did it because we wanted to. And all of these movies were really cheap. Like, I'm pretty sure all of them had budgets around $2 million or less. They were all filmed in like 2 weeks or less. So like, I understand why they did it, simply because why not? You know?
Yeah.
If it was just going to be the 3 of them noodling around to write it and then film it and then put it out, you know? Why not?
Well, and I also think that's why, at least for me, like, they get so much better with each one, is because I think to a certain degree it's all of them getting older and maybe reflecting on the last thing they made and being like, how can we now address this in a more adult way? And then, yeah, you get to the last one, the 2013 one, where it's been 20 years. They've all been working for 20 years in the industry. And yeah, there's so much more depth there, which I think is what we're all latching onto. It's just that by the time you get to the third one, there's like legitimate depth, not like early 20s bullshit pseudo depth, which is because those movies were made when they were all young, and these movies are made when they all have like adult experience. So yeah.
See, that's why I looked when we were talking about it, how old Richard Linklater would have been when the first one came out, and he was like 33, so I don't really know if I can explain it away like that. I'm looking to see the co-writer. Okay, she's like basically the same age, a year younger. So they were both like early 30s when they wrote the first one, although Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke basically rewrote the whole thing because apparently it wasn't romantic, the original script. And my question is, if it wasn't romantic, as we've all acknowledged, that's the only, like, quote-unquote plot, what the hell was it?
I mean,
what was it?
That makes me think that it was probably more akin to, like, what the third one ended up being. Like, it was probably more cynical about these people and that. But, like,
if their connection isn't romantic, what's the motivation for her to get off the train with this stranger as a woman in her early 20s and just like spend the whole night talking to him? Because no offense, he's an idiot. Like, I hated
Oh, I hated both.
Oh my god, especially watching this in my man-hating phase. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? She's still walking around with this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, by the end of that movie, was like, can they both die? Like, that was...
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the trilogy, I really didn't like either of them either.
Yeah.
Even especially after the fight in Before Midnight, because that fight, like, it came out of nowhere. Like, it was the last half of that movie, and so for 2.5 movies of this entire trilogy, we've just seen them be like sappy romantic couple, right? And then for the last little bit, that fight comes out of nowhere, and it felt so... Like, if you think about it again as just one big movie, the pacing of that, where that fight starts, compared to the rest of the runtime of all the other movies, it's so insignificant just to be tacked on the end. I felt, anyway. What I'm saying is I basically wish it started earlier in that movie, and most of the rest of that whole last movie was them fighting and reflecting on their entire relationship, rather than the first half of the movie just continuing to be them in a happy relationship, just older.
Dan, I'm like, so sorry to break it to you, but like, there was tension from the beginning of the third movie. Maybe you like didn't notice, but Celine was fully a fight was brewing. I could feel it in my bones the second they were in that car.
But it wasn't a fight. Like, it was almost like it was too cute.
By
still.
the time she was making remarks at dinner, I was like, oh no,
Yeah, that's
it's going
when-
down.
That dinner scene, I straight up despised that dinner scene. Like, that was my least favorite scene in all three of
No,
these
come
movies.
on.
It was just so uncomfortable.
Well, okay, sure. It is the most uncomfortable out of all of them. I'll give you that. But at least like something at least uncomfortable things were happening as opposed to nothing. But yeah, I mean, to your point.
Okay, that's fair. But I still
Yeah,
don't
that's
like
fair.
it.
I don't. I'm with you. Like, I think I side more with Carol on this. Like, I thought they did a decent enough job of at least setting up the tension. And it's not. I get what you're saying, that it's like you have two movies of pure romance and then this one where it's like they hate each other. That pacing of the trilogy is weird. But I feel like intrinsically to just the third movie, which in a lot of ways I'm kind of just viewing the third movie as its own thing. Like, I think they do a decent enough job of setting up the tension in a way where it's like, you know that they've had this fight before, like these types of fights have happened before, and then even with the level of comfort when you get to that third fight and like the level of comfort they have fighting, it felt like two people that had argued a lot before.
Well, especially she's just doing it tits out.
I know, yeah, that was also really surprising to me that out of nowhere we started getting nudity, but whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fine. But I think, and to be fair, I think that's an intentional choice on their part, again, to try and get across this idea that like they've had this fight before. They've been together for 10 years. They're comfortable with each other. Like, this is them just doing the rounds the way that they have been. It's been a long time coming.
But this was like the last fight in the movie was like divorce-worthy fighting.
Yes.
Like, they were very. I feel like that one was more than just like a marriage fight. That was like you could break up over the fight.
100%. And I had read it as more like this is the culmination of what was a lot of bickering, and it starts off as more bickering and then leads into a very fucked up, they're saying really hurtful things fight. But to your point, the pacing of the first two movies, and this was not planned as a trilogy, so like, I mean, you never could have paced that properly. But that's almost why I feel like there's an edit of this that's just the third movie that intercuts flashbacks from the first two that would work a lot better. And you just play up, like you just jump into this relationship where you can tell things are tense and you don't really know what's going on, and you just get these moments of flashbacks of like, I mean, I want to say Godfather 2, but I know neither of you have seen Godfather 2, but that movie does a similar thing structure-wise. But regardless, like, cutting back to their more romantic times to like emphasize points, but then having it be pretty clear that like they are not in a good place. But yeah, like coming from where things were left on the second movie and jumping right into the third one, I think it is asking a lot to be like, now just imagine 10 years of a bad relationship. And like, I do think that because this movie was literally released 10 years later, there's been so much time since the second one that maybe it, in that sense, it makes it a little bit easier. But I think I enjoyed the third movie so much more that I was willing to kind of be like, fuck everything else. I'm just going to treat this as its own canon. Like, this is just its own thing, and I'll just fill in the gaps as I need to. Yeah. But I do appreciate, and then again, this goes to the filmmaking, where, like, they really were actually making a movie with this third one. They weren't just fucking around, taking a vacation and talking in the streets. Like, the level of detail they had, like, when they're having the fight at the apartment, and even there's like the shot of him sitting on the couch and she goes to make tea and she makes tea and leave it on the table, and like how that is very much an inverse of at the end of the second movie when they get to her apartment and he's sitting on the couch and she makes him tea, and it's like this is like the beginning of like, oh, we are going to be together, we're going to make this happen, and this is the inverse of that. I was like, that's a nice little visual detail that you like actually paid attention to. And then even just the fact that that apartment was very like cold and unwelcoming as opposed to her apartment in the first movie. So like those little visual details and stuff, I was like, okay, you're doing something, you know. Like this one, that I think that's why the third one was like such a big jump for me in terms of quality.
I will say, I think because just speaking specifically to it's kind of weird that there were two romantic movies and then like a big fight at the end of the third. I will say that given that these movies happened in real time and the first one was them meeting, there was a lot of just like bickering because they had, you know, different ideals in some senses. And then because in the second one they hadn't seen each other for 9 whole years, it kind of, there wasn't really a reason or even a relationship to cause fighting. And so I think in those ways, like, those movies were able to stay romantic because they benefited from the huge expanses of time and them just fully not seeing each other and really not knowing each other, honestly. And yeah, so that's why they could only fight 20 years later, because that was the only time that they were able to actually spend that full chunk of time that we weren't with them together and building and getting to know each other. And it was, speaking of like the movies being well thought out, I will say that in the very first movie, I think he was like, oh, I hate relationships, because eventually, like, it always ends when the girl's like, oh, what do you hate about me? And then you say it and eventually it leads to a breakup. I do think that kind of happening in the third movie felt rewarding, because it did deal with he was saying the cyclical nature of all relationships, no matter how in love you think you are or aren't, or whatever happens in between. And I did really like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third movie does a good job of tying it together as a trilogy in a way that it was never conceived. Paying off a lot of those elements, both visually and story-wise, and feeling like, oh, this is a nice ending. And also, by the way, like, what would happen with two idiots like this? Like, that was the other thing, was I was so appreciative of the fact that the whole third movie was kind of like, fuck you for thinking the first movie was romantic. These people are dumb. Like, I was like, oh, okay. Like, that felt
okay,
nice.
I don't think Selena's dumb.
You don't think she's dumb?
No.
Okay, but, like, the relationship is dumb.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, like, the relationship, them together is dumb.
Well, it's just because the relationship is built off of this one single night that they spent together.
Yeah.
When they
and also kids. They don't communicate, like, whatsoever. They literally just are incapable of communicating in any reasonable, normal, healthy way. And so it's like, literally, even as far, I mean, whatever, we don't have to get into it, but, like, I don't want to sit here and be a fucking couples counselor for them. Like, but the point is, they are a terrible couple. They were doomed. This relationship was never going to work, so I'm glad that was the payoff that we got, because it would have felt weird if it was like a third movie and they were still in love and everything was happy and then it ended.
You know what, I will say, obviously, like, I came to this trilogy once it was known to be a trilogy, because, you know, we're all pretty young. So I will say...
Yeah, I mean, we're about the age that they were in
No, exactly. Yeah. So I will say I was, like, surprised that they were... I wanted to continue it as a trilogy in which they actually were together, because I, like, as much as romantic me would have loved the idea of, you know, them meeting up in 6 months and falling in love, etc., etc., obviously that wouldn't happen. And even just, like, I do agree that they had chemistry, but, like, I don't think, like, either of them could say they were in love with each other after that one night. Like, they argued about so much, and, like, sure, they, like, had sex and kissed a few times, but it, like, didn't even seem that, like, natural. Like, they were both, like, awkward children, and, like, that's fine. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. That's, like, how most relationships start, and I think that's totally okay. But I think something I always get stuck on is how they reference in every subsequent movie, like, we fell in love that day. We fell in love. It's the beginning of our grand romance. And that's, like, one thing that always is, like, I don't see that. I don't know how anyone sees that and agrees with it. And I think the cynical, grown-up versions of them we see in the third movie, I would expect them to be acknowledging that. And they didn't really. Like, even Ethan Hawke kind of says the opposite. He's like, no, this is true love, whether you like it or not, haha.
Well,
so,
but I think
that surprised me.
I think a lot of the themes of the third movie is just that, like, true love is bullshit. Like, at that dinner scene, which is very uncomfortable, but one of the parts of that dinner scene that I really appreciated was the conversations that they were all having about, like, what love even is, and how, like, the idea of love is, like, awful, because, like, it like sets you up for failure in a way where, like, what you should be focused on is, like, having a fulfilling life and being with someone else that has a fulfilling life, and if you're both fulfilled, then you'll have a good life together. But, like, yeah, like, this whole third movie seems like a critique on love, but also in a way where and something else I appreciated from the dinner scene, that like everyone else got it except like the two protagonists. Like they are, that's what I mean about like their relationship being dumb, is that like they're still stuck in this mindset of like what true love is, and when everyone else is talking about their experience with love and how healthy their relationships are, and it's like they can't relate to that like whatsoever, because they're still like 20-year-old children that are like, but we love each other, and it's like, you guys have completely different lives and like ideals, and like you're doing the exact opposite of what all these other people in healthy relationships are telling you to do, which is like be your own person first. So I don't know if I think them not cluing in on it, and him even at the end being like, but I love you and we love each other, it's more meant to be like a commentary on like that type of person in a very cynical way. Like that is a very cynical point of view for the movie to take, but like I think that's the point. And also, and Carol, you may have a fact on this, but I think part of the reason the third movie is as cynical as it is because I believe at least one, if not a couple of the people involved had like gone through a divorce or something prior to making it.
Well, Ethan Hawke had gone through a divorce prior to making the second movie.
Interesting.
He divorced Uma Thurman. They divorced because of infidelity issues. And they had just had Maya Hawke together.
Nice.
The famous Maya Hawke.
Stranger Things.
Yeah, of Stranger Things season 3? Season 2? No, season 3 fame.
Whatever the newest one is.
The one with the
mall.
She was also in a new movie with Andrew Garfield, Mainstream, and she does music. She does it all.
Wasn't she in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yes.
I think she was.
I don't really remember much of that movie, if I'm being honest.
I also don't.
I don't remember either, but I just remember because like Uma Thurman obviously did so much stuff with Quentin Tarantino, and so I vaguely remember like like her daughter now is in the movie as well, and I was like, okay, but like doesn't she hate him? Didn't she like come out and be like, he abused me? Why would she be okay with her daughter being in his movie? I don't know.
That's kind of weird.
I don't know, but I just whatever. Yeah, but so did Richard Linklater then maybe have a divorce before this third movie? Or am I just crazy?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't really look into Richard Linklater that much. I can't say anyone's names today.
Good old...
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is the last one called Before?
Okay, Dan. This is literally in a movie that I think liked. The part that just stuck with me the most was that Before Sunrise is the plot device of that movie. That they only... Before Sunset is the plot device of that movie. He's got to get on a train. Before Midnight means nothing.
I'm not really sure.
Because nothing's happening at midnight. Like...
No.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. I had the same thought.
Yeah, I wanted to see if I missed something.
No, you didn't miss anything. It was kind of the idea of, like, it being, before the night of their hotel room ended, but they just needed a before something, to be honest, and, like, what's left,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think the second movie might have been my favorite because that was the only one to take place pretty much in real time.
I kind of wish they did all of them like that.
Yeah, me too.
That would have been cool. Like, I like that because the second one was the shortest, it was like an hour 20. They got away with being able to, like, literally just track these people for an hour and 20 minutes of that evening. Yeah. It was nice. It was just an hour. It was just a, like, nice little hour-long stroll through Paris. It made their conversation more bearable.
I agree.
I think, rather than just watching, like in the first movie, watching them have an entire just conversation over the course of a night.
Yeah. I will say, and this is like the first movie very much again like had those vibes of just train of consciousness, whatever Richard Linklater thought of, and then whatever ultimately the actors thought of, just vague whatever. Whereas the second movie, I think part of it being in real time, but also because it was a reconnection, it felt very reminiscent to me of just like people that know each other catching up, and like the way that type of conversation can spiral. Like it felt I think the naturalistic way that the first one was supposed to feel, but the first one actually to me felt very stilted because of how ridiculous it all sort of was. Whereas the second one, I was like, sure, yeah, these two people that haven't seen each other and they're grabbing a coffee and hanging out, whatever. Like, yeah, you would just talk about all these vague random things and catch up, and that makes sense to me. I agree.
Also, sorry, I just Googled, Linklater has been partnered with the same person since the 1990s. I don't think they are married, but they have children together.
Okay.
So, no.
Interesting.
That's the answer to your question.
Interesting.
So Linklater has figured out the perfect situation of true love. So it's not a myth, apparently.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know if he's happy.
I don't know.
You saw what he wrote in the last movie.
It's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah. No, but just from what you're saying, Marco, I agree. Like the context for their conversation in Before Sunset makes a lot more sense, rather than just two people who are like awkwardly meeting, so they're just trying to make conversation on random topics that they feel strongly about. And like you also said in your intro blurb, Marco, or not your intro, but like what your thoughts on the movies were. In that first movie, like there's a lot of concepts that they talk about that I agree with. It just doesn't, like, they don't meld together into this movie. They don't feel like they fit. And even the last movie did that a little bit for me. Like at the dinner, in the dinner scene when they're talking about AI for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that came out of absolutely nowhere and had no...
Not just AI
purpose.
sex.
Okay, but it felt so disconnected from anything else in any of these movies. That really stood out to me. It wasn't as bad as like that type of stuff in the first movie, but yeah, I'll agree. It did feel like good ideas that the writers just wanted to get out, but didn't really have the... Like, they didn't set it up for it to fit in the scene. It just kind of... They used the scene to get these ideas out.
Yeah.
And it just felt a little bit incomplete.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the tough thing, right? It's like, it's all fine and dandy. Like you said, there's a lot of interesting ideas there, but unless you're having a character have to, like, deal with that idea in some way, then it's just exposition at that point. Like, you've just said something, but it doesn't mean anything, and also it doesn't really inform the characters, because the characters then don't do anything by which you'd be like, oh, like, I see, they said that, and they're acting this way, like, that really informs their choices. No, because the whole movie is just them saying things. So, like, that doesn't really pay off in any way. Also, because you were talking about the AI thing, there are, in each one of these movies, scenes that are very clearly Richard Linklater just talking to the audience about his style of, like, filmmaking, and they really abhorrently piss me off. And that AI one is one of them. But, like, in Before Sunrise, yes, the first one, there's that scene on the train when he's pitching her the idea of, like, 24 hours in, like, everyone's life, whatever, and I was like, shut up. I was like, dude, like...
That's Boyhood. That was a proto Boyhood.
I fucking hate that. In the second one...
You wouldn't watch that, Marco?
COVID's taking me.
A 24-hour stream of a random
No, I
person's
wouldn't.
I mean, you wouldn't watch the whole thing, but, you know, I would tune in every so often. Actually, no, that's a lie. There's, like, HBO shows I'd rather be watching.
Correct. And then in the second one...
You also have to watch Lost for the show.
True.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounded so disgusted.
Yeah. Yeah, but...
I just have a long list. It's more stress than disgust, I promise. I'm very much looking forward
to it. We all have very long lists of things that we'll never get to. I mean, that's life. There's like 4 things... That's life, baby.
That's the theme of this
I should film myself looking at the list that I'm never going to get to, and that'll be a movie. Because that's life, right? It's just for 24 hours. No, but then in the second movie, they have the scene where, like, he's being interviewed about his book. And they're like, so, like, what happens? Do you think they get together? And he's like, well, I don't really like to answer those kinds of questions and, like, put that perspective on people, whatever. And I was like, okay, again, like, this is just you using this character to get out your thoughts of what I'm sure people asked you after the first movie. Blah. Like, I'm so sick of that. And then that AI thing in the third movie where they're talking about, like, could an AI ever, like, write a story? And then, like, there's that whole... conversation they have about, like, well, we always thought that, like, they couldn't beat us at chess, but then they could beat us at chess, and, like, that very much to me was him being like, this is why I tell stories about the human experience, because, like, only humans could capture the human experience. Like, that's, to me, why that scene is there. It's just Richard Linklater giving a big middle finger to everyone and, like, justifying the existence of these movies, basically. Is him being like, it's not just, like, manufactured. This is, like, art in its purest form because it captures the human experience, which I completely fucking disagree with, but whatever, Dickie. Whatever floats your boat. Dickie Linklater. In your fucking weird time jump movies about people just talking and shit.
Do you think anyone calls him Dickie?
I'm gonna call him Dickie from now on.
Okay, sorry. 2 things. One, Julie Delpy did end a pretty long relationship before the release of the 3rd film.
Okay, maybe that's what it was then.
So correct there.
Someone had to be really cynical on that production, because that 3rd film was very cynical.
Well, I'm sure Ethan Hawke just is in general.
Sure.
I don't know. He strikes me that way.
Isn't that the only one that, like, all 3 of them, like Richard Linklater, Julie Delpy, and Ethan Hawke, actually co-wrote together?
They wrote all of them together.
But, like...
But they didn't get credited for the first one, but they did get credited for the 2nd and 3rd, but all of them, they wrote very, very, very significant chunks of the dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't notice it in the credits until the last movie, I guess.
Yeah.
That the 3 of them were the writer's credits.
Julie Delpy, when asked about it in, like, more recent interviews, is, like, pretty mad that her and Ethan didn't get credited on the first film, because she was like, we had to rewrite the whole thing, but whatever.
Yeah.
None of my business.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. It worked out for them.
Okay. And then I was going to say, just in general, I'm kind of surprised at, like, how many thoughts these movies have inspired in me. It's so rare on this podcast for me to have this many thoughts. Okay, so I find it very fascinating, and this is really just a self-examination of my own psyche. I like all of the parts of these movies in theory.
Okay.
I love, like, even thinking about it, I love the idea of, like, this couple meeting on the train. I love the idea of them having this argument about the palm reader. I love the encounter with this poet guy. I love the idea of just observing life and putting that into a movie. Even the idea of, like, oh my god, a stream of, like, watching people all the time. Like I said, in theory, I do like that idea because I am fascinated by, you know, just how everyone lives their lives and how that impacts who they become to be and what they think and what they do. But even as I said, I'd rather watch, you know, anything else rather than that. And I do think it's important, even just, like, to be able to empathize with everyone, to, like, know everyone's stories by, like, you know, listening to them and learning about their experiences. But yeah, I don't know what the disconnect is there, because I like it all in theory, but then when I see it, I'm like, this is dumb. I'd rather watch anything else.
Well,
I can't be here for it.
I have a theory on why this is, if you would like to hear my theory on your theory.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You mean
my
your
hypothesis, I guess. We'll have to fucking see if we can prove it using experimentation and write a lab report on our methods.
Stop.
But here's my problem. Okay? What I think why these movies sound conceptually cool, why Boyhood sounds conceptually cool, why the idea of just, like, capturing life sounds conceptually cool but never really works the way it's supposed to, is because, unfortunately, nothing in life ever happens in periods of time that are, like, perceivable as a dramatic change, if that makes sense. So, like, yeah, like, people change and, like, people have opinions on things, but those things are very, very gradual, and most of it's very internalized. So, like my opinions on a topic have really never ever changed in the middle of a conversation. It's changed by me, like, thinking about that over long periods of time and eventually going, all right, yeah, I guess this is now where I stand on this. And, like, that is not only long form, but it's incredibly personal. And I think that's why I take such issue with this, and why I think I really gravitate towards high concept stuff, is because high concept stuff, the fun thing with that is you are creating a context by which to explore these ideas, because you're forcing people to have outward and dramatic changes in their thoughts. So, like, I think that's why, for example, a trilogy that you did not vibe with that much, Carol, the Planet of the Apes trilogy, and, like, I remember, like, when we talked about it, the line that, like, I laughed so hard at because it was so funny is, like, when we were talking about the second one, and Dan and I were like waxing poetic about the fucking Shakespearean drama of it all, and you were like, yeah, but why does it have to be apes? And like that line, like I was very funny. We need to clip that and put that in our new intro for year 2. But what I would say is, I think these movies are examples of why those movies needed to be apes, because like at a certain point, you kind of need a high concept thing to latch onto by which to explore the human condition, because if you're just watching humans be humans, it's pretty inherently boring like 99.9% of the time, unless it's like really horrific shit that you would probably not want to watch anyway, because like then that would just be horrific and scarring. And so the problem with this is like, that's great that we're exploring these two people talking, but in a way it actually does fulfill its premise, because like these people just kind of talk at each other a lot, which like is how a lot of people communicate. And then like in between the movies we have to assume that they internalized and changed their thoughts or whatever, but that's not like dramatic fiction, so it's not engaging to watch, because like there's nothing about the human experience that is dramatically engaging. Like it's all very slow and it's all very internalized.
I'll attest to that. I think after watching these, I'm officially over protagonists that are just realistic human beings. Like, if you're making a fictional story, obviously I get it for like a documentary that is supposed to be real. Like this material feels like it should fit more into a documentary. But if you're making a fictional movie, like, go all out and make a super fictional, interesting character. Like, you have that license because none of this is real. You can make like a person that fits your story ideally, rather than trying to write a story around a real life or a realistic seeming figure. Like, fit your character for the type of story that you want to tell, rather than fitting a story around just like a person that has to be able to exist in real life. It feels like you're just limiting yourself at this point.
So just one quick thing, Carol, and then you can jump right in. But the documentary thing I think is such a great point, Dan, because if you think about a documentary, what is the biggest format thing that a documentary has is it has constant context. You are constantly being reminded by other observers of the situation, by experts in the field, whatever. Everyone is constantly providing you with new context, and when it's well edited, that context allows you to understand the changes that are happening in the real world story. Because if you just took a bunch of footage from the real world and clipped it all together, you'd be like, okay, these events happened. But it's that context that the experts and the eyewitnesses and whatever that they provide that makes a documentary compelling. Like, I think about like that don't fuck with cats thing on Netflix that I think we've all seen and all really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Like, if that was just like security cam footage and shots of like conversations on a laptop, like we'd all just be like, all right. But like it's the stories of all the people and what they went through, like that is what gives it its life and energy. And I think that's 100% the biggest failing of trying to make a dramatic movie that is structured to feel like real life, is you're completely stripping away context. Like, literally even having voiceover narration like Goodfellas style would have like improved everything by like 1,000%. I feel like to really like to have them say one thing and think another or whatever, just something other than just saying stuff.
Okay, what I did want to say was going off Dan's point in that if you're making a fiction, you should make some part of it, you know, like make it necessary for it to be fiction. Make something a little bit crazy. And I will say a recent film that I will continue to tell you guys to watch until you do is Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it did that perfectly.
Yeah, we have to.
It like, the thing is, it's really just about the relationship between a mother and daughter. Honestly, just all family. Generational relationships. That's it. But the setting and the storytelling was set, obviously. I'm sure everyone knows enough about it and hears about it all the time, but I'm just saying, if you haven't seen it, you have to see it. I'm so sorry. I won't shut up about it until I die. But that was the perfect use of a crazy world to tell a simple, in theory, story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about even Interstellar. Like, Interstellar is literally just about a dad that has to go away for work. Like, at its core, Interstellar is a dad that had to travel for work. That's what that movie is. It's a work trip. Like, the motivations and the emotion behind it can be very simple. But yeah, I think you need those dramatic stakes to feel anything. Otherwise, it's just lacking.
Yeah, like if you just all this to say, if you're writing fiction, write fiction. Like, don't confuse fiction and nonfiction.
Sure, and also, like, just like there are whole subsets of visual artists who try to draw and paint photoreal. Like, that's their whole thing. It's like, you'll see my art and won't be able to tell if it's a picture or a painting. Like, that's cool that you could.
But what's the point?
I know, that's
this
the thing.
reminds me of I'm thinking of ending things.
Exactly.
And the conversation they have in that.
Yeah, the one nugget of information that's useful
and,
in that movie.
Yes, and there are for whatever reason subsets of people that are into that art, both in visual art or even in film. I mean, in the 90s, this was a big revolution of like this subgenre of film, and I don't get it. I don't see what the point of that is. If you're gonna make a piece of art, make a piece of art. Like, if I wanted to see a photograph, I would see a photograph. If I wanted to see two awkward 20-somethings talk, I would just go somewhere and hear two awkward 20-somethings talk. I would go sit in the mall and eavesdrop. Like, there's no... That's my take on all this, which is why I'm so hard on these types of movies. And for some people, they live or die by these movies. Like, and I mean, God bless. Like, do you? If this is what you're into, this is what you're into. I don't see the appeal of it. Like, I feel like you better tackle the human condition in high concept stuff than you do in just this. But hey, whatever. To each their own. I don't know.
Well, another more recent and more like simplistic example of that is there was a promo shot or something for the new upcoming Avatar movie.
Stop.
Okay. And it was no it's pertinent, I promise. It was like a shot of one of the what the fuck are the animals in Avatar
Na'vi?
I don't even remember.
Whatever.
It's been so long. Oh,
The
good
Na'vi.
job, Marco.
Yeah, really good job. It was a shot of a Navi's like hands in water, okay? And it was just the hands in the water, and people are freaking out on Twitter because it's 100% CG, apparently. Like, assuming that it is, right? But I was like, but what even is the point of that? It's a shot of someone's hands that looks so realistic you can't even tell they're CG. Why not just paint someone's hands blue? Save thousands of like hours of CGI rendering for this one shot if you can't even tell the difference anyway. Like, what is the point of wasting all that time, work, and money?
It's a tech demo. I mean, it's literally just a tech demo.
That's all. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to the photorealism discussion. If someone is talented enough to like paint something looking photorealistic, is that not cool and
It's
impressive?
talent. It's certainly
Yeah.
talent.
It's not that it's not.
Like, I don't really want to look at it.
Yes,
like, I don't really
it's just
care
a
to do
more-
that. But it's just like, that's so cool that people are talented enough to do that. So like, it still
It is.
should exist in its own right.
Sure.
No?
I think all we're saying is it's a much more complex way of arriving at the
Yes.
exact
Yeah,
same
yeah, yeah.
point
Absolutely.
as a
Yeah.
different method.
I mean, like, all different styles of art should get to exist. But like,
Yeah. And like your example, like someone painting photorealistic, sure. But like the Avatar example, that is just an example of people like laboring over the CGI for what reason? And like thousands or possibly millions of dollars spent for what reason when you could have just done it practically. That's the stuff I don't get. Like, if you're talking about people who love to paint photorealistically, sure, like I'm not going to shit on that. And it looks great. It's absolutely art and talent. But there's different situations and
it's all about purpose. Like, what's your purpose in your style of art? And as long as you have a purpose in what you're doing with your style of art, cool. But yeah, whatever. Well, I'll leave it there.
Sorry, we were just talking about it, and I kind of was curious to know how much money has been spent on making all the avatars so far.
oh my god.
A lot.
You sure you want to know?
The combined budget of the first film and its 4 sequels estimated at $1 billion.
That's less than I thought.
That's still
I mean, it's a
$1 billion,
lot.
though.
100 million.
Wait, what? 100 million?
Wait, no, 1,000 million. That's a billion, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know numbers.
1,000
Yeah.
millions is a billion, yeah.
Like, in theory, I have a science degree, but I'm an artist at heart.
yeah, no, it's 1,000 million.
Oh, that's so
$1
many.
billion.
To be fair, Infinity War and Endgame had a combined budget of like 500 million, and that was 2 movies. So like 4 movies
True.
having double the budget, like that math adds up, but it is still like a ridiculous amount of money. Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, but Infinity War and Endgame were like movies that people.
Oh,
were
and they
asking
also
for.
had like some of like the biggest movie stars on the planet, like all of them.
True. A lot of that probably went to the
Yeah,
actors,
absolutely.
yeah. And the promotional material. Like, we've barely gotten anything over the past 13. I don't want to talk about it. I just brought it up for that one photorealistic example. That's
It's
it.
the year of redemption, Dan. What if it's a good movie?
Like, it probably will be fine. Just like the first movie is fine.
But
But-
why?
Yeah.
So it's been an hour. Do we have anything left to say?
I mean,
I
I was just gonna say like we should probably end this by ranking the movies, but
Absolutely. And I also do
Yeah, I
have,
would be interested.
fun facts for all of them.
okay.
well, now that we brought it up, I'm too curious. I have to hear what you guys' rankings are. Can we do that?
You want to
Yeah,
do that first?
absolutely.
Sure.
Ooh, and then I also have a question to ask
'Kay.
after as well.
Perfect.
Okay.
Carol, go first.
So, for me, I think... Oh, God. You'd think I would have thought about this, huh? Oh, gosh darn. I think, actually... Even though I think Before Midnight, I agree, is the most watchable, I still think it's my least favorite. Maybe the optimist in me is fighting the cynic in me, and that's why. But yeah, I think for me, Before Midnight is third. Before Sunset is probably first. And then Before Sunrise is right in the middle. And I think that is simply
Okay.
because of like how I think of them, as opposed to what do I want to watch.
Okay.
Okay. I'll stem off of that. I'll agree that Before Midnight has the most like real plot of all of these, but it's actually not my number one either. I'd probably go Before Sunset number 1, Before Midnight number 2, and then Before Sunrise last.
Nice. So yeah, I alluded to it. These movies each get exponentially better for me, so it goes Before Midnight, Before Sunset, and then Before Sunrise. I do just want to add.
All of ours are different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at us.
I do just want to add though that as much as Before Midnight is the most cynical of all these movies, I also think it's the only one that even remotely captures what I like. These whole movies are about like the realism and like life, and like Before Midnight is the only one where I was like, this feels to me like what two people who have been together with 10 years would argue like, as opposed to the first two where as much as they were about real life, it was so abhorrently dumb that I was kind of like, no one would ever do this. But in the third one, when they were like that weird tension between them in the car ride, the miscommunication, the weird tension at dinner, which leads into the fight, I was like, yeah, like this all tracks for me. And even though it's the most dramatic structure-wise, even though it's the most dramatic filmmaking-wise, ironically, I think it's the one that captures life the best. Which, Richard Linklater, take a lesson from that, buddy.
I will say the one thing about this whole, like, just capturing life is that I don't really believe that they're both just doing so well, even, like, career-wise. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, how is this guy getting invited to this grand villa in Greece by this other pretentious author
I was questioning
dude?
that
Like,
a little bit too.
come on. And they really like his books. They're probably
But
shitty
also,
books.
Who are the rest of the people? How did they know them?
I don't know. One was a grandson. That's all I got.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
None of it matters.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's not the point.
None of it
It's not
matters.
about them, Dan.
Literally none of it matters.
I was curious as to who all these people around the dinner table were, acting like family.
The old guy was an author. That's all I got.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
Okay, so before I get into fun facts then, because the whole point almost of the first movie was for it to act as a test essentially of, do you think they're going to meet up in 6 months to see if you're a romantic or a cynic? So now I ask of you, do you think they divorce or stay together after the third movie? Sure, it all ends and it seems like it'll be fine, but you never know. What do you think?
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because I guess each movie has a little bit of ambiguity after its ending. Before you see the next movie and know what ends up happening. Obviously, like the first one, you can only guess if they meet up again after 6 months.
I think I would have gone crazy if I couldn't watch them all. Like if I knew other movies were going to exist and I couldn't just watch them to get the answers. Right. Like I kind of hate when I have to like, what do you think happened? Yeah. I don't know. You tell me. You fucking wrote it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm the same way. Yeah.
But I like how they address that in the next movie with like the context of it being the book.
Yeah.
And people are asking him probably the question that was asked to Richard Linklater after the first movie.
But also, like, that's the point. You, the author, what in your head canon, you have to tell me.
What do you
I hate when they're like, it doesn't matter what I think. It's like, yes, it does. You wrote the characters. They are essentially you.
Yeah, well, we also talked about this on the I'm thinking of ending things, where as long as there is an answer, then you can leave it ambiguous. But you can't if there isn't an answer.
100%.
Okay, but also, like, no, I want to push further and say, sure, do it if there is an answer, but also tell me your answer. Yeah. Don't be like, there's an answer, but it's for me to know and you to find out. Like, no.
They go hand in hand, because if you can give an answer, then there is an answer, but, like, you can choose to then leave it ambiguous. Sure. It's like, if you can, then you get the green light to be like, you get the green light to, like, fuck with the audience a little bit and be like, there's an answer, but I'm not going to tell you. So that was cool. But to answer the original question of after Before Midnight, I think I was under the impression that they do stay together just because of how it ends. I can't see... And they made up very quickly. After a fight that bad. Yes, but just because of, like, based off the last shot and, like, the last conversation that they have, I'm going to guess we're supposed to believe that they stay together.
Yeah, I agree that they stay together, but again, with the cynical lens of the movie, I think them staying together is a bad thing. Like, I think we're supposed to want them to break up. I think we're supposed to realize they're on different trajectories, but I think the whole theme of the movie is, like, that they are dumb romantics. And, like, it's actively making their life worse. And maybe that's just me projecting how much I hated the first movie onto it, but, like, I think there is enough in the text of the third movie that I think the point of it is they're just going to do whatever they need to do to stay together because they believe in this bullshit idea of true love that, as everyone else, who we don't know who they are, but they were at the dinner or whatever, as they all said, that's bullshit, and these two are kind of like, just can't, they don't process that. So, like, they should break up. Like, they are not meant to be together. But, like, I think the point of the movie in that last...
Just praying on their
No, yeah, but I think that last scene of her, like, doing that funny character that she did earlier to be like, well, this is what you want, isn't it? And, like, him playing along and all that. Like, I think that's the movie is, like, trying to show us the perspective of, even though they should, they won't. Because they're, like, clinging to something that is bullshit. Is my take on it. So I do agree they stay together, but their lives are worse because of it. Like, if they ever made another movie, they would probably be serial killers.
What would the next movie be called?
I was thinking about that. Like, if they made another one
before Twilight.
But then people would think it was a prequel to Twilight.
I would be okay with
actually. Isn't Twilight and Midnight the same thing?
No,
it's not.
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know. Hold on. Before I give my answer,
Dawn.
I'm gonna Google.
But now we're just
Breaking
getting way
Dawn?
too close into the Twilight titles.
What could it be? What other time have they not done? Before noon?
Before.
It's just a breakfast date?
before dinner.
Before supper.
Because they're really old. Yeah, they'll call it supper. Because that's what old people call it.
Before death.
Okay, twilight is just the soft light in the sky seen before the rising and especially after the setting of the sun, occasioned by the illumination of the Earth's atmosphere by the direct rays of the sun and their reflection on the Earth. But midnight is just the middle of the night. So, no, not the same.
Okay.
Okay, so that's on the table.
Yeah?
They should name it after something. Switch it up. Because the reboot has to be like...
The reboot.
A different... It's got to be more retrospective,
Well,
right?
actually, they can't do it. Because if they're continuing with the 9 years later, that would be 2022. Because the last one came out in 2013.
So it could be
Unless they made a secret movie that we don't know about, that they're about to
They
release.
did try to make, just kind of shortly delving into my fun fact, they tried to make Before Midnight a secret. Because initially Ethan Hawke was like, yeah, it's happening this summer. And then Julie Delpy was like, no, it's not. And then people saw them filming in Greece and they were like, yes,
Yes,
it is.
She was like the Andrew Garfield. And,
Yeah.
And he was like the Tom
Yeah,
Holland.
absolutely. But anyway, I didn't give my thoughts about whether I think they stay together or not.
Please do.
I am on a very similar thinking, whatever, you get it, as both of you, in that I think they do probably stay together but shouldn't. And because I didn't mention this before, but I do very much relate to Celine and a lot of her ways of thinking, in like, I don't know, just on a surface level of we're both environmentalists, or even we're both, you know, attempting to be feminists and don't want our lives to revolve around men, and et cetera, et cetera. But I do kind of hope that maybe she does reach a breaking point after he does bring up his son thing again and is like, you know what, fuck you, I'm just gonna live my life, you live yours. Like, I know, like, realistically, where we left off, that probably won't happen. But if she's already saying she's falling out of love with him on this one day, I can't imagine that's the last time she says something like that, or it's the worst thing she says. So I do think that eventually it might escalate more to the point where, you know, maybe he does realize he shouldn't be treated this way, or that she is like, you know what, actually, I'd rather leave you than continue to hurt you this much.
Yeah.
But I mean, probably wouldn't, but it'd be cute if it did.
Yeah.
Happen.
I also think
go ahead with your thoughts.
I was just gonna say, because we've kind of joked about like how quickly they make up at the end of the movie, or like seemingly make up anyway. Like, we're fine, we're not arguing anymore. That was also something else, along with the tension that they had sort of at the beginning, where that ending and seeing how quickly they were just kind of like, whatever, we're moving past this, was another thing for me where I was like, this is like an ongoing thing. Like, they're so used to having these big brawling arguments that like they're able to kind of resolve it. And even though
she's French, of course.
Of course, yeah. Sure. That was another, this movie just made me want to watch Marriage Story. Like, I might just watch Marriage Story tonight, because like it's kind of just Marriage Story light. So I kind of just want to watch Marriage Story, because Marriage Story is fucking phenomenal. So
I was gonna say,
well, it's because,
okay, no, you go, Dan. I'm just gonna jump in a fun fact,
just
so
real
everyone
quick.
get your thoughts out before I go there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, another reason the last one reminded me of Marriage Story a lot is because the kids were the stakes, which is just like a Marriage Story.
Yeah.
But I just feel like Marriage Story was executed better. It's pretty much the same concept, but just it's all execution.
Marriage Story is built around that sort of arc too, and then when you get that final argument, it is so natural in the like the stakes of the movie.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess that's another thing is Marriage Story. The whole movie is about fighting, whereas like that big fight really only comes out at the end, and it feels kind of late.
Okay, so now, fun fact, I will say that this movie was inspired by a woman that Richard Linklater met at a toy store in... Oh God, where was it?
What was he doing at a toy store?
I don't know. It didn't say.
That's kind of gross.
I know. Met in a toy shop in Philadelphia in 1989. They walked around the city together, conversing deep into the night. So that was one inspiration. But secondly, because he knew most of the movie was just going to be a discussion between a man and a woman, he's like, I couldn't possibly write like a woman. Which, like, I mean, low-key, as much as I don't think I like Richard Linklater, I don't know much about him, but just, like,
I agree.
his vibes
the vibes
seem a
are
little
off.
off.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I don't think I like him, but the one thing I will give him props for is that he didn't try to write for the woman and instead invited a woman in to write the woman's perspective. That is, like, actually a very good thing for him to do.
He also has a weird haircut.
Yeah, he, like, kind of, I mean, I don't want to, like, judge people just based on their looks, because, like, we're over that. It's 2022, but, like, looks a little off.
I mean,
too.
some people can be judged on their looks.
I mean, I'm not. It's just the haircut. Like, that's all I'm saying.
So Kim Krazan, the co-writer of the first film, her inspiration was that she rode around Europe, much like Jesse, on trains meeting people, and on one trip met a Norwegian man on the way to Paris, and they also ended up walking around the city all night. So, you know what? I guess people do meet up in the 80s and 90s and walk around cities all night together. Never happened to me, but if it happened to both of them, I believe it.
To be fair, that part, especially in Europe, I buy.
Sure.
Because, like, in Europe, like, very much it is, like, more comfortable, everyone's out partying at night vibes. Like,
Yeah.
I see that. It's more just, like, does that warrant a movie? As opposed to, like, and also, like, an American man being like, hey, French woman, come get off this train with me. Like, that also feels kind of weird. But they acknowledge it.
Okay.
So, that's
But I will also say, and this is kind of something I hate also, people just writing their lives into their work.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, this was based on Richard Linklater meeting this woman in a toy shop, and they kept in touch for a little bit, but then they fell out of touch. So this movie was actually Richard Linklater's attempt at getting her attention again. But
That's really fucking pathetic.
this is the saddest part.
Okay.
Is that she died, like, oh God, when? She died before the release of the movie in a horrific motorcycle accident in her early 20s. And that is why she never reached out and they lost contact. And he only found out right before the release of Before Midnight. And so Before Midnight is dedicated to her.
So that's very similar to what happened at the beginning of Before Sunset, where they were supposed to reconnect, but like, it wasn't written because of that, because he only found out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah. And also just a little fun fact. You know how in the beginning of the first movie there's like a German couple arguing?
Mm-hmm.
He left the subtitles out, but what's actually happening is that the man is reading a newspaper and it says how 70,000 women are addicted to alcohol. And he says to his wife, "You're one of them." And she says that he's actually an alcoholic. And he replies, "I have a reason to do it. I'm married to you." So they're having a really great argument.
So fun.
Also, Jennifer Aniston and Gwyneth Paltrow auditioned for the lead.
That's kind of
Interesting.
weird.
That is,
Because, like, they couldn't have been French women in that case, right?
No.
Like, I hope not.
Yeah, no, that would not have worked. I'm glad they went with Julie.
After watching these, though, I can't believe that he made School of Rock. Anymore.
That's the one movie of his I like.
Me too.
I've even seen Dazed and Confused, and I didn't like it.
So, School of Rock, I think, you know how, like, I think very early in the podcast we talked about how, like, Aaron Sorkin movies always feel like Sorkin movies. They don't feel like whoever the director is. Like, School of Rock is just a Jack Black movie. Like, I really think Richard Linklater's, like, name was on that movie, but Jack Black was kind of like, this is what we're doing. Because it's too good to be a Richard Linklater movie, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it does just feel like a Jack Black directed movie, if there was
his
ever such a
fingerprints
thing.
are all over it. And, like, if it was Linklater, like, actively behind the scenes being a super involved director, do more stuff like that, because that movie's fucking good and funny, and, like, stop with this bullshit. Like, just
know.
make more good stuff.
Yeah, that one's so much more plot driven than any other thing I've seen from him.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think though I've only seen like these, School of Rock and Boyhood. Pretty sure those are the only
Marco, have you seen Boyhood?
only
Yes.
films of his.
You've both seen Boyhood?
It took 12
really?
years to make, Carol.
I know, but I
not?
still didn't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, but it took...
I didn't see it in theaters. I saw
Yeah,
it on
yeah.
Netflix like a couple years after.
I
it came
wish, like, at its best picture, you know how they always show scenes from the movie? I wish for Boyhood they were just like, it took 12 years to make. Like, they just put, like, black...
Words.
Yeah, a black title card with white text, and that was all they showed for Boyhood. And it's like, this is the only reason it's nominated, guys. Just so we're all aware.
Okay, another fun fact.
Mhm.
The second movie, which we all loved because it was so simple and took place in real time, was supposed to be filmed in 4 locations with a much larger budget, but he didn't secure funding for that, which I think was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah,
I
that's for the
agree.
best. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have a really angering fun fact, is that Julie Delpy's agent at the time of the second movie tried to dissuade her from doing it because he said it was a stupid movie that no one's going to see, and he told her to go to the gym instead and then fired her the same day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the better of the trilogy, so it's a good thing. Also, can you imagine if this entire trilogy hinging off the chemistry between these two actors, if they just recast
So
the second
stupid.
movie and pretended that it was the same
Well,
person?
that's the and also just it gets brought up in like the second and third films. She keeps being like, "Oh, I'm a fatty. You think I'm fat?" And I'm like, first of all, where? Like, I know the first movie was in the 90s, and like we were fat shaming everyone who was above a 00. But by the time the second and third one come out, are you fucking kidding me?
I know, it's ridiculous.
Her.
Especially in the third one, and I get it, like, because it's her insecurity about, like, he clearly cheated on her, and so, like, that's where it's coming
and
from.
She's had children,
Sure.
and that changes your body in ways that you can truly never recover from.
Absolutely. But also,
And you
like...
shouldn't have to or be expected to in any way.
Yeah, totally. Abortion should be legal.
It's
Very topical, but, like, abortion should be legal.
Just talking about all the feminist issues. Thanks, Marco.
You're not gonna, find any disagreement from that, anyone on this thing. Kill all the babies, I don't give a shit.
No.
But yeah, it is just funny when she's talking about that, and I'm like, you are a very beautiful, attractive woman, but also, like, I guess that's the point, is, like, that she feels that way because of how toxic the relationship is and what she's been through, even though she's objectively very beautiful and attractive. But yeah, it's a funny disconnect, I agree.
Okay, and I just have one more fun fact. In the last movie, or I guess in the second movie is where I should begin, when they're reconnecting and they're talking about, you know, where their lives are at, and Jesse says he has a kid, and he asks Celine if she has one, and she says, "Oh no, I left my 2 daughters in the car." That's, like, funny, because then the third film starts with her in the car with her 2 daughters. Wow, they brought it back. And that's all my fun
This is what
facts.
I'm saying, though. Like, this is why, like, the third movie is a movie. Like, it actually is, like, paying attention to things. Even the fact that the third movie ends with a fight, like a bickering fight. The first movie starts with a bickering fight between a couple. Like, there is love and care outside of just, like, we're gonna film people talking put into the third movie. And yeah, not all of it works all the time, but, like, God, I'm telling you guys, when that pan up shot happened, like, I know we already talked about it, but I was like, like, in the midst of COVID, just dying on the couch, and the camera panned, and I was like, thank you for having a camera move.
I'm just confused of why that one in particular got you, because one of the early shots in the first movie had that too, because that connects to something that one other problem I had with the last movie is I think it was too reliant on callbacks.
Sure.
And that was a callback because I think all of the movies have, like, shots of their shoes and then panning up to them. So I think that's all that was.
But I think for me it was less, like, the physical camera move part of it, but also just, like, the way the movie looked. Like, even just, like, when it started and, like, the visuals and the color and all that, I was like, oh my god, like, this is a modern looking... This movie wasn't made for $2 with a fucking disposable camera. This looks like it was...
I mean, it was made for approximately the same budget as the other two.
I know, but like, look how far technology has come. That it can, like,
that's
actually
Yeah.
look good and, like, not...
You know what I
anger
will
me.
say?
So you mean
The third movie did have a camera move that even I noticed, and famously I don't notice shit like that. But they were sitting at the dinner table by the water, and I don't remember if it was before the fight or after the fight because they sat there twice. But it was them talking, and it started obviously with, I don't even know what any shots are called, so I'm just going to describe it to you guys. Sure. Imagine it. It started with a shot of them sitting and talking, and then as they discussed it, slowly like moved back so you could see more.
Oh, that was the very last shot of
Was
the movie.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. And that I really noticed, and I was like, whoa, I feel like nothing like that happened in the other movie.
Yeah, it was cinematic.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even a lot of the staging and choreography of their argument, like, I thought was really well done, of like having them constantly, like, she's naked and then
that part kind of felt like a stage play with her like
Yes.
entering and exiting and him like flopping on the couch.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
And I really like that because I was like, at its core, all you can hope to achieve with movies this style is to make them feel like a good stage play. Like, if it's just gonna be a very stripped back characters talking in rooms, cool, make it feel like a stage play. And that scene really, that's why that scene works so well for me, is I was like, there's nice blocking here. She's naked a lot of it, which is kind of weird, but like then she like puts her clothes on and he tries to get naked, but then even just like his reaction of like, all right, we're not having sex, and like he puts his pants back on and like they go to fight, like it just was all very like I was like, oh, this is nice. Like they're not just turning corners. Like there's like actual stuff happening there.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I think all this to sum up, like, there is merit within these movies. These aren't, just because I didn't have a great time with them, like, that is not to say they're bad movies. And, just stemming off what we were just talking about, they're very well made too. And, like, well directed. Yeah. Like, they just don't, for me, I guess the one problem is they just don't equal the sum of their parts. Yeah. That's the best way I could put it.
Totally.
But for some people, it would. It might.
I mean, it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It depends.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, what do the other ones have?
They're pretty
Probably
high. They're all in the
close,
90s,
right?
I think.
Yeah, the second one was like, they're all in the 90s. I think the third one was like 96 or something, and the second one was 93-ish.
Yeah. I mean, I think, but...
Oh, the second one was the lowest?
Yeah.
Really?
Probably because it was like the shortest. I would assume is probably why. Even though I think it's pretty close for being the best. For me, anyway, and you had it as the best.
I will say, it was definitely jarring for it just ending as soon as she says, you're going to miss your flight, and then boom. I was like, whoa, okay.
Ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fade out, especially.
Yeah, and it's not even that it ended on that line or that note. Like, I think just even in the editing of it was too sudden.
I agree.
I was like,
yes.
The transition,
not good.
Yeah.
Like, I know I don't make movies, but I'm telling you that's not good.
No, I thought
You know what it made me think of is like they were waiting for the print to be finished, and the editor was just like frantically trying to edit the last scene, and then like Richard was like, come on, like we need this, I need to go bring it to this place, and he was like, okay, and they just like cut to black, and he was like, done, and like nobody thought about that whatsoever.
Well, it wasn't even, it would have been better.
No, it's a fade. It's a weird fade.
Yes. Fade out as she's awkwardly dancing.
It's so weird. It's so weird.
As Nina Simone.
Yeah. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to say something else that didn't really come up too much, but
Sure.
Ethan Hawke, like, specifically, obviously is great in this, but I also love Ethan Hawke. I think he is so great in literally everything I've seen him in, and
he's wasted.
I've heard. It's unfortunate. Even going as far back as Dead Poets Society, which I don't know, like, what your guys' thoughts are, but I personally really love that movie, and he was like a little.
I've never seen that.
You got what the fuck? Again, we went to the same high school. I saw it like 3 times in high school.
Nope.
Okay. I really love that movie.
No, is that the one with Robin Williams?
And, okay, well, I would recommend watching it. Ethan Hawke...
I've heard good things.
It's like his breakout performance, and he was kind of like a child, but he's really, really good, and he gets like a big emotional crux turn at the end that's really, really satisfying and emotional and good. And like, everything that I've seen him in, he is so good in, but I'm so frustrated that he chooses to keep working with Richard Linklater, because like so much of his time is taken up by doing these dumb projects.
They've done 10 things together.
I know, and I'm kind of like, can you go work with someone else? Because I would love.
And one of them took 12 years, so.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I can't believe the wasted talent of like he's just working with this one guy, like. And then he shows up in Moon Knight and is also wasted, but it's like, god damn it, like, can we just put him in something else from another person. Please. Because I really love him.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
And he recently, like, this clip has been surfacing around the internet of him talking about, like, cinema and basically, like, defending superhero movies, but then also being like, it's important that those movies exist, but also, like, all types of movies should exist. And, like, I love those movies, and, like, I would love to be in those movies and whatever, but also, like, it's not the be-all, end-all of movies. And, like, it was just, like, such a wonderful, like, good take on that subject that I feel like has had only bad takes. Because it's either people being like, fuck everything, or it's people being like, those movies aren't art, but his was, like, such a well-rounded, normal person take to have. And I was like, And I know, like, we always say, like, he could be an asshole, but, like,
Yeah.
seemed like cool, and he's really talented, and I would just like to see him in other stuff.
Sure.
Yes.
We're ending on that? All right, go Ethan Hawke. Although I will say he's, like, super out of Julie Delpy's league. Or, like, Julie Delpy's, like, very out of his league. I mean, maybe it's just a me thing. I personally don't find him attractive, like, even a tiny bit, so...
Okay.
But, I get it. He's charismatic.
I don't find him attractive as he's aged. I think when he was younger, he was a bit more, like, traditional, like, cute, but not, like...
I still don't think so.
I don't think he's ever...
I just don't like his facial.
I agree. Like, I think that's why when he's more baby-faced, I'm like, all right, you look like a preteen that, like, sure, someone might enjoy. But, like, as he's gotten older, I'm kind of like...
Someone might enjoy.
As he's gotten
Don't
older...
say a preteen someone might enjoy,
You know what I mean?
Marco.
You know, like... But do you know what I mean? When it's, like, when you're young, it's not... There's, like, different standards. Where it's, like, as long as you look well put together and, like, clean and, like, relatively cute, like...
If you're a man.
Sure. Like...
Yeah.
He had the best hair in
Exactly.
the first movie.
He's had the best overall look when he was young. Now, as he's gotten older, he's really just...
Isn't it nice that when you're a man, if you just have nice hair and look relatively put together, people will call you attractive?
Yes.
That's really funny.
Yes. I mean, it's true, though.
I love that.
It's true. It's
I
an
know.
unfortunate reality
And I
of
hate it.
society. Yeah, he's by no means a heartthrob. But, yeah, and he only gets worse as time goes on. So, what?
Wow. You know, just fun.
I mean, I'm sorry, but...
I love how we went from, put him in more movies. I think we should just end with, it just he gets older and it gets worse.
We should just, like...
No, it's just, like, in the last movie, he has, like, shaggy, like, from Scooby-Doo hair.
Yeah. It looks stupid.
Maybe he's a big old stoner now. We didn't see enough of his life. It was just like a day.
He does not strike me as a stoner. He's very intense. I don't...
Yeah.
Yeah, especially not as he got older.
Maybe as a young man.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Thanks again for listening to the Feature Length Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you liked this video or audio. Give us a rating and review. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes of this podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video, or follow the podcast on Spotify. If you want to connect with us directly, you can follow us on Instagram at featurelengthpodcast, or even send us an email at featurelengthpodcast@gmail.com. Catch you on the flip side.